Well, thank you very much for the invitation. This is quite strange for me because normally I'm speaking about physiology, about the training process, but I was asked to speak about Norwegian success. You should hear from my dialect that I am not Norwegian. I am from Texas. So how can I talk about Norwegian success? I understand your confusion, but I have lived in Norway and worked in Norwegian sport since 1995. So half of my life has been in Norway. And I have been part of this process and have been involved in evaluating the Norwegian approach. So maybe despite my Texas dialect, I have some Norwegian in me now. And I'll try to discuss this. Now, the picture you're looking at is Karsten Warholm, an interesting example. He's the world record holder in the 400-meter hurdles. And he's from a tiny place called Ulsteinvik with 6,000 inhabitants. And he's actually from an island outside of that. So he's from an even smaller place. And he was not a hurdler. He was a decathlete. He was a very talented young kid. But he did lots of sports, and he didn't focus on the hurdles until 18, which is quite the good example of the Norwegian model of late specialization and so forth. So it was a good picture to begin with. But let's look at the data. Norway, something happened at a certain point in the Winter Olympics, and in the summer, where we've seen a change in performance. And it really, if you put the summer and winter Olympic medal results together, Norway is a country of 5 million, and something happened around 1988, and it was bad. And that is, Norway had its worst Olympics ever as a winter Olympics country. And then something else also happened that was going to be good, and that is it was announced that Norway would be the host of the Lillehammer Olympics in 1994. So they had a low point in 1988, and then they had this first very big high point in 1994, and even the preparation for the 94 Olympics started a positive trend. But what happened in that point between the two? The best explanation we have for the change was the development of what was called Olympia-toppen, which is the Norwegian Olympic Training Center. So I will talk about that, how that organization works and how it has evolved. Since Olympia-toppen was developed, these are the difference in medal production. And it's true for both summer and winter, but obviously Norway is a better winter sports nation, but the relative effect is the same for summer and winter sports. And the overall effect is that Norway has produced a much higher number of medals. And if we compare them with Sweden and Finland, which are comparable nations from a population standpoint and sports and so forth, very clear differences. So it doesn't seem to be a function of just a general change or more events and so forth. Something real changed that increased the medal production, the results. So what's the secret sauce? I love chili sauce. I'm from Texas. And I felt like I might be biased because I'm an outsider. I've lived in Norway many years, but I am, after all, not Norwegian. So I consulted with colleagues. And these are colleagues that I have worked a great deal with over the years. One was my own PhD student, Thomas Haugen, who has worked at Olympia-toppen for many years. Espen Tønnesen, the same, many years, and Eivind Sandbakk. So all of these we have published together, at least 30 different research papers, and they have published, together we published a couple of hundred different research papers focusing on performance. So we agreed, they quality assured what I'm presenting you today. So it's not just coming from me. And this is one of the bottom lines. The secret is that we don't have secrets. The secret is that I can come to you and tell you everything I know, and that's fine. No one is putting a gag on my mouth or anywhere. There are no secrets. But we do think there are some reasons. So let's begin. And I kind of have fashioned this in the form of a pyramid, okay? And it starts here with the Norwegian culture. When I moved to Norway, I came from the United States. I was used to bigger is better. What is your bench press? How fast are you? How much do you weigh? Because the team sports like American football, that was the culture. And then I moved to Norway, and it was a culture of endurance, a culture of the long process, and an appreciation for that. And that dates back over 100 years. These are the heroes of Norwegian culture, not the biggest, but those who are best at preparing, cooperating, enduring, exploring possibilities. And they are historically, like Roald Amundsen, Fridtjof Nansen, they were scientific. So science and practice were merged already in these historical figures in Norway. So I think that was an interesting or an important platform, because most of the medals that are generated in Norway, not all of course, but a lot are related to endurance events. And so this you can look up. Cecilia Skog, for example, has been to the top of Everest, to the North Pole, to the South Pole, just as one example. So they have done some quite amazing achievements, and often preparing with many, but having to do the work alone, to ski across Antarctica alone. But the preparation was with many. And I think that's also part of how things work in sports sometimes. We have to work together, but ultimately you step on the starting line alone. And this is a quote from Fridtjof Nansen, who won the Nobel Prize, the Nobel Peace Prize, later for his work with refugees. The difficult is what takes a little time. The impossible takes a little longer. So it's the mindset of a process. That's a good foundation. And then comes this, I think what I have witnessed in 30 years is a very holistic approach to athlete development. And this is challenging. Olympia-toppen, these are I've directly translated from the documentation of the organization. Olympia-toppen's mission is to help increase the chances of winning among Norwegian athletes. That is a direct quote. Not doing well, not winning a medal, but winning by challenging, quality assuring, and supporting the development process through the sports federations. So Olympia-toppen does not take over for the sports federations, but the sports federations can opt in. They can choose to receive help. But Olympia-toppen will be a very demanding partner if they do. Because the only thing the goal is a gold medal, not a silver. Silvers happen, but it's the gold that is the goal. And this is very interesting because the Norwegian culture normally is kind of influenced by what they call the janteloven, which is you're not better than anybody else. That is the social norm. Dates back over 100 years. That you don't stick your head above, that you don't think you're something special. But in this exception, it's okay to be better. Winning gold medals is an exception apparently now in Norway. And it was started with Gro Harlem Brundtland, who was a prime minister. In the build-up to the Olympics, she said, "It is typically Norwegian to be good." And that was a famous quote that gave the Norwegian people a kind of a feeling of confidence. And they've expressed it through Olympism. So this is important because it's not the Norwegian culture to put yourself above, but there has to be that will to really have demanding goals if you're going to win gold medals. And this is the directly translated, sammen om de store prestasjonene, means working together for great performances. So that's the fundamental mindset, is if we don't cooperate, we're too small to succeed. We have to cooperate. We have to win together, or we will lose apart. So, when you travel to Oslo, you will see this beautiful Olympia-toppen facility. No, you won't. It doesn't exist. Now, that's an architectural drawing. They would like that to be, but it was struck down by the Oslo municipality. This is Olympia-toppen. Sorry. It's not very fancy. Very modest facilities. Enough, but absolutely not more. Not nearly as nice as you have it here. But what do they have? What do they focus on? Well, in the modest building, there is I would say, a world-class aggregation of knowledge and experience. Scientific knowledge and practical experience. Coaches who have coached the best, athletes who have been the best, and now work to move the next athletes up. And there is a relentless focus on the training process. Relentless. How do we maximize this process? And it begins with the daily training. Every aspect of what's the quality of the training from day to day for years. And then, so that's physiology, that's biomechanics, that's nutrition, working together. And then relationships in the performance team. And that may be a team of just a coach and one athlete, or it may be a coaching staff and the handball team. So at different levels, but that's psychology. How do we make sure that we are communicating well, that we have shared mental models of the process, that we see things the same way, both on the field and off the field, so that we can make the right decisions together, either in a tenth of a second or over time. And then finally, at the very top of the pyramid is what we've called, or they call, competition execution. When you go to the Olympics or to a world championship, you have earned a position, but you have to execute. You have to execute your plan. If you're a rower, you have to get through the early stages. You have to have energy to reach the final, and then you should be at your best on the day of the final, or you're probably not going to win the gold. So competition execution from start to finish, from dealing with time zones to making sure that, whether you have pollution issues and allergies, every aspect of it has to be planned and executed. So that is a very important part of the Olympia-toppen mandate, to do that right and help the athletes do that as best as they can. And all of us here, I suspect, work in this dichotomy between the scientist and the coach. I'm a scientist. I was trained in statistics and methods. I want to put together a sample of athletes, and I want the sample to be as big as possible. I'm going to try to make generalizable conclusions. But the coach I work with will say, yes, but every one of my athletes is N equals 1. They're unique. Every one of them I have to adapt specifically to what they can and cannot do and help them get better. So we think differently in that way. I use reductionist methods. I want to control all the variables. Right? As a scientist. The coach says, I can't do that. I deal in reality. And in the real world, all of the variables are connected. If my athlete is dealing with a problem at home with their partner or their parents, that will affect their physiology. I don't get to control that. I have to manage it as a coach. So this is different. I will use inferential statistics and p-values to eliminate, and I will eliminate outliers, assuming that something must have been wrong. All athletes are. I think we're going to have to invest in a different system here. Just an idea. So I will try to eliminate outliers. I will treat things statistically, the average. The coach is faced with complexity, with all the variables being connected, and they have to manage that. So we have to come together.
So what did I do? Just try the pink one. That should be more stable from what I see here. Change the system.
No, this is not changing the system. This is repeating the system. There's a difference. So I said, well, I want to make a bridge between these two. So I asked an AI function to create a bridge where there was a scientist and a coach and a bridge. And I asked it 8 different times. And every time the scientist was an old man and the coach was a little bit younger man. I thought that in itself was interesting. I had to tell the AI to put a woman on the other side. And I think this is part of our issue, is how do we build these bridges when there are so many fundamental kinds of cultural differences between the science and the coaching. But I think we're getting better at that in the Norwegian model. We're trying to do everything we can to bring those groups together. And respect. I guess my career has been about respecting coaches as a scientist, respecting the unique knowledge they have. And then coaches eventually trusting me or science. So that bridge building, I do believe, is part of the success recipe. And it's challenging. And in my work, I've tried to think about another pyramid of just what's the most important in endurance training, and then building kind of the Maslow's hierarchy, making sure that the fundamentals are that we focus on those first, and then the details are a consequence of getting the fundamentals right, but not flipping the pyramid. And that pyramid is kind of floating there. So what's the foundation for it? Well, I think part of the success of the Norwegian model is respecting this, that the foundation for success has to be that we are always putting the athlete's health first. That continuity, that health, that both psychological and physical is the foundation for any success they're going to have. And I accept when I put this, physical and mental health is relative. All athletes are just like regular people. They have anxieties. They have sometimes depression, sometimes uncertainty. They have all the different challenges that regular people have. Don't misunderstand that. So that means we have to work with those anxieties, with those uncertainties, and so forth. If we don't, everything falls apart. The crack in the foundation moves up. So I believe that's fundamental to the Norwegian model, is respecting that. And we as coaches, you as coaches, you will either tend to strengthen the health of your athlete, to make them more tenacious, to make them more resilient, or you will tend to break them down with your coaching, your feedback. Because, if you do not understand that they are coming to you with all kinds of other stresses, not just the stress of the training session you're going to put on them. They have work and school stress. They get sick. They have relationship stress, just like regular people. They have sleep issues, nutrition issues. Sometimes the training gets in the way of eating properly. They have injuries. They have parenting stress. Now, what does that mean? Well, it can be the stress of being a parent as an athlete, but it can also be the stress of having parents. Because let me tell you, parents can be sources of stress for athletes. Parents have expectations without necessarily having understanding of what's actually happening. And athletes get older. And I can assure you, getting older can be a stress because your body changes. The late career athlete, their body is not the same as it was as a young 22-year-old invincible athlete. All of this is part of a process that we have to respect and work with for our athletes. Now, I just last week, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I was up in a very distant place in Norway I'd never been for a conference in connection with the 2025 World Championships in skiing, cross-country skiing, or the Nordic Championships, cross-country skiing and ski jump, sorry. And it's at a place called Meråker, another tiny place in Norway. But if you look on the right side, those are names of high school athletes. This is a high school, meaning, age 16 to 18. Those are all Olympic or World Championship medalists from one high school with 150 students. 20 of them are athletes each year for the last 30 years. That's a concentration of excellence. So how do you do that? How do you build that? Good, adequate facilities, the perfect weather for training a lot in snow, that helps. Great coaches, a small city that doesn't have much of anything else, so they support the school. Lots of ingredients. And at this conference, there were gold medalists, there were elite coaches, like one of these has coached for 6 different countries. There were top scientists, and the single word, the single ingredient that was discussed most by the athletes, by the coaches, as the critical ingredient in a long-term process towards winning gold was joy. Not VO2 max, not lactate metabolism. It was joy. Every athlete that got on the stage said, if they had had challenges, if they had had difficulties, they said, I lost the joy in the process. And when I lost the joy, I started falling apart. And when I found the joy back, I had my greatest success. So this is part of the secret sauce, if there is such a thing, is respecting that, man, training takes time. It's a long process. You better enjoy it. And we, as all the scientists and coaches and psychologists, we need to make sure that's also part of the process. There's enjoyment, joyfulness. And that's part of the model. I know that sounds very unscientific, but it seems to be very critical to the success of our athletes. And then we come to this idea of sharing what we know. Sharing of knowledge in every setting that I've experienced and everything I've read from how things are happening, it builds on two things: trust and respect. We have to trust each other. That if I tell you, I give you my information, if I tell you, hey, I'm feeling bad today, I don't think that interval session is I'm not ready. I have to trust that you as my coach will not think I'm weak. Because I'm not weak. I'm honest. And I am motivated. I kick ass day after day, but today something's wrong. Trust me, coach. Don't punish me. Does that make sense? And that's true in science. It's true for the biomechanist and the physiologist working together. It's true for the nutritionist and the psychologist working together. And it's true for the coach and the scientist. Coaches don't respect scientists very often, or they don't trust them because they don't feel respected by scientists. Scientists say, well, we have all the knowledge and you are a coach. Listen to what we say. That doesn't work. Already from the first meeting, you've created a wall instead of a bridge. So, we have to have trust and respect among coaches and athletes. The athlete has to trust the coach. The coach has to trust what the athlete is saying, that they're being honest, or else the training adjustment process cannot work. There has to be trust and respect across knowledge domains because they are interconnected. The nutrition specialist needs to be speaking with the physiologist and the biomechanist, because when one change is made, it will affect other aspects of the process. I would also argue that sports science programs compete more than they cooperate, often. Maybe that's not true in Germany. Maybe everyone is wonderfully cooperative here. I doubt it. It's competitive. But if you can achieve cooperation between different sports science programs, suddenly you have the opportunity to do really powerful research. You can do multi-center trials, which is what we do in health and medicine. We never managed to do it in sports because we're competing for our small piece of pie. So in Norway, we've developed a regional Olympia-toppen system, and each regional center is connected to a university sports science program, and we've managed to cooperate around big research projects. We're all using the same equipment. We're all using the same methodology. And we're sharing in the authorship of the research. It helps, but it requires trust and respect. And then finally, and this took the longest, because I'm one of the foreigners, we have to trust and respect international expertise. Norway, for years when I was there, they were scared of me and other foreigners, but now we're part of the team because they found out, well, Stephen's not dangerous. He's actually going to try to help. And that's true for many scholars and coaches and so forth. But that maybe took the longest amount of time. And then in the particular field I work in is endurance. We have tried to develop a common language so that the rowers, the cross-country skiers, and the cyclists could actually sit at a table and talk with each other about training and actually benefit from that interaction. And that requires some common language. And one of the most important in Norway has been just agreeing on training zones. What are the intensity zones, and what does Stephen mean or Olaf mean when he says zone 1 or zone 3? So starting with the basic physiology and then adding some pedagogy of dividing the zones somewhat arbitrarily, but agreeing on a 5-zone model for the aerobic range, for example. Not because it's perfect, not because it is the correct, absolute truth, but because now we all understand each other when we say zone 3. Does that make sense? I hope. And it turns out to be very useful. It's just common language. And we try to quality assure this by testing, by doing lots of data collection, revising. In 2020, the entire intensity scale system was revised, not in, it looks basically the same, but details were challenged. We tested and published, here's what we see. And for example here, quality assurance of the intensity scale was achieved using standardized tests, highly trained athletes going into these different regional centers and then combining all the data. So this process is part of the entire nationwide cooperation. And I think that's fairly unusual to achieve. And there has emerged a quite consistent shared training philosophy. And we've documented it, we've published about it, there's no secrets. And it's not new. This is Ingrid Christensen, world record holder in 1985, 1986. And this is how she trained in a world record year based on those 5 intensity zones I just showed you. This is work done by Espen Tønnesen. And it looks very similar in this all-time great cross-country skier, Marit Bjørgen, from the 2000s. So it's nothing new, and it's not fancy, but it's consistent. And consistency turns out to be a secret sauce. Consistency works. This is Olaf Tufte, 2-time Olympic gold in the single sculler. Same basic principle. In fact, we were able to look at the historical changes in intensity distribution and see that it had shifted towards less high intensity and more basic endurance across decades. And sometimes it goes wrong. This is one of the best. This was the same woman, Marit Bjørgen. She's the all-time winning Olympian on the winner's side. And she won her first championship in 2005, but then she faded, and she was ready to retire in 2009. But Olympia-toppen came in and said, we think we know what's wrong. And we think we can help you fix it. And they did. And she had her best 5 years ever. So having an understanding of a basic training philosophy helps you to see when things are not going as planned, and perhaps why. Simple, accurate testing. This is important. And sports scientists, boy, we love numbers. Man, there's nothing we enjoy more than a massive Excel spreadsheet with just numbers everywhere. This will create problems for us to deal with for at least 10 years. That's great. Lots of publications and confusion. We thrive on confusion because every confusion is just another paper to publish. Let me tell you, folks, athletes do not find that useful at all. The athlete says less is more. Keep it simple, scientist, or get out of my face. That's how that works. And so this is my job as a scientist, is to simplify, but not simplify to the point of it being wrong. And that's an art. That's a challenge that is our job. Keep it simple, repeatable, and comparable across time. How do we achieve that? Well, in common, we decide on what is the best equipment, whether it's the lactate analyzer, the VO2 system, the treadmill, and we generally buy the same equipment across all the various regional centers so that we can cooperate. We standardize protocols. We do the same lactate profile in every one of those locations. We agree on what's the duration. You know, is it 5? Is it 4? Is it 3? We all have to do the same, or else we're not going to be able to compare. Okay? We have the same calibration procedures. We cooperate around testing out new technologies that might be useful. And we, by doing all this together, we can both publish together, but also the athletes trust us more. And we've got a better relationship. And then finally, I would say that it's okay to mess up. Failures are not fatal if you learn from them. And intelligent failures are those failures where we had a logic to what we did, that we felt like it was based on science, but it still didn't work. So now we're going to have to go back and rethink and unravel. And this was discussed over 10 years ago by in a business setting. They said that the Olympia-toppen system seems to be doing this. It says even in successful programs, there's always something that doesn't go exactly to plan. In learning theory, these gaps are viewed as small failures, and when they are exploited in the light of specific expectations, they strengthen experience-based learning. So this is learning theory. They become intelligent failures. And those who were studying the Olympia-toppen model at the time said the Norwegian Olympic top sport program support for such a learning model seems to be a key factor behind international success. And so I think this is quite important. I remember reading it over 10 years ago, and I think it's still true today. That there will be mistakes made, but the mistakes that are made, that we will be able to understand why we got it wrong and be more likely to get it right the next time for the next group of athletes, for the next competition. So then it's a learning process. So, to sum up, It's culture. Endurance and preparation are heroic traits in Norway. It's holism. You can't separate brain and body. As much as I would have loved to be able to do it, because I was a physiologist myself, most physiologists become hobby psychologists as we get older. And I think there's a reason for that, because we start understanding better and better the importance of a holistic view. Consistency is the quiet superpower. It's not sexy, but it works. Routines matter. Ordinary things done well, day after day, give extraordinary results. That's the amazing thing about training, and training correctly. Communication is key. Open, trusting, with a shared language. Sharing is a virtue. It's not dangerous. Giving, everything I've learned as a scientist has told me, the more I give away, the more I get back. And it comes back in multiples. And so I'm never afraid to share, and I think that's become more true in the organization in Norway, in Olympia-toppen. Sharing is not giving away and losing. And finally, smart failures. They can trigger learning for later success. So we're not afraid of them. Thank you.